Hello everybody and welcome back to M&J Games. I am Michael. Now in today's video, this is the first tier list that I'm doing in terms of ranking roller coasters at the theme parks that I've traveled to this year. So the first theme park that I was lucky enough to go to this year was Six Flags over Georgia. And I went back in March and then again in May, because in March it was very crowded as it was opening up for the first time in I believe over a year. So there were a lot of people out there. And so in this list, I'm going to talk about which coasters I think are the best and why. So let's start with my least favorite coaster. Now, my least favorite coaster on this list is Great American Scream Machine. And some people love the classic old wooden coasters. I'm not one of those people. I think they're rough, and this one's no exception. And for me, if I'm going to ride a coaster like this, I've got to ride near the front. Because if I ride in the back, it's going to give me a massive headache, the rattling, the shaking. But if you like that and you can handle it, this is very much an old-fashioned, out-and-back wooden coaster with some very minimal or unbanked turns. So this would be a good coaster for you. It was built in 1973. It's built by the Toboggan Company. And originally it was one of two wooden coasters in the park, but now since one of them has gotten the RMC treatment, this is the lone wooden coaster, and it still has one of those classic rough endings where you just jolt to a stop. So you gotta be mindful of that. So that is my least favorite coaster in the park. Now the next one on the list for me is Blue Hawk. And so this one, now I do have to say this, that I have not ridden it since it was I can't remember if it was retracked or just retrained, so I'm having to go based off of what I remember it from 5 or 6 years ago. And so it's a Vekoma coaster, and I'm just not a big fan of this coaster. I think the layout's okay. It is really cool how it's kind of over a pond, but to me it just doesn't provide a lot of fun. So this one is the next one on the list. Now, the next one is the Mine Train ride. It's built by Aerodynamics in 1967, and this is an extremely rough coaster. It's rough for a mine train. It's one of those that you get off of, and if you're a little bit taller or maybe a little bigger, your legs might be in a little bit of pain. The layout's pretty cool. It's got 3 lift hills. The last one you kind of dive down through a tunnel. So the concept and idea of it is still great to this day, but it's very rough, very rickety, not a fun and enjoyable ride. Now, I will have to say the one on this list that I have not ridden on is the Joker Funhouse coaster. So that one I can't rank because I have not ridden on it. So now the next on my list is going to be Superman Ultimate Flight. And I know some people love flying coasters. Some people they're just okay. For me, the pretzel loop is really intense, sometimes almost too intense, but then outside the pretzel loop, there's really not much to the ride. The inline twist at the end is pretty cool, but after that pretzel loop, it's pretty tame, and I think the fact of it being a terrain coaster is really cool, but in terms of the actual thrill of the ride, there's not much thrill to it. That's just my personal opinion, so that's why I have it ranked where it is on the list. So now the next one on the list is Mindbender. Now I will say this one might jump up on the list more once everything gets once it opens again, because when I was there it wasn't open yet, because I know they're retracking, they were doing some different things with it. But to me, Mindbender is number 6 on the list, and it's still a fun ride. It's a Schwarzkopf coaster. It's an older one built in 1978. It's got, I believe it's the first triple loop, so it's got 3 loops to it, and those loops are pretty intense on these rides. The G-forces is pretty impressive. So that one is 6th on my list. Now number 5, I'm going to go with the Georgia Scorcher. It's built in 1999. It's a B&M stand-up. It's one of the few B&M stand-ups that has not been converted to a floorless, and I'm okay with that because it's not a very tall coaster. I think the largest drop is right at 100 feet or maybe just below, and so it's not an overly large coaster. It's got 2 inversions with a loop and then a corkscrew. It's got a couple of nice turns, and it's got a cool layout. And to me, what's really cool about it is they recently colored it red, and it sits there right at the front of the park. So as you're walking by from where you park, you see this coaster rolling by, and it's got that classic loud B&M sound. So it's really cool. Enjoy the ride. Sometimes the standing up part can not be the most comfortable for some people, but it is a fun ride, and I'm glad they're not converting it to a sit-down or floorless. So I really enjoy that ride. Now, number 4 is Batman the Ride. Built in 1997, obviously it's a B&M invert, and it's one of, I believe, 12 or 13 of these around the world. And you know it's got to be a good ride for it to be cloned so often. I think some people knock Batman rides because so many of them are clones, but this one to me runs really fast. It's intense, especially in the back row, and like it is just so impressive with how small the layout it has in terms of height and how it's compact, but it packs a massive punch. Like I believe the tallest hill once again is right around 100 feet. Goes about 55, 58 miles per hour, but everything is so tight that you really get a lot of G-forces, and it's a lot of fun. To me, it's one of the better Batman clones that I've been on. I've been on 4 or 5 of them, I believe, so I really enjoy that one. I know a lot of people say they feel like this one runs faster or one of the fastest of all of them. So if that's true, that's probably why it definitely packs some intensity. Now, number 3, I'm going to go with the only Gerstlauer coaster I've ridden, and it's Daredevil Dive. This was opened in 2011, and it's a Eurofighter, at least if I'm remembering correctly on the type of train that it has. But it's a lot of fun. The layout's nice, it's smooth, all the inversions that just are really nice, and some of them provide some airtime, like especially the one at the end. But man, even though it's only 95 feet tall in terms of the largest drop, there's just something nerve-wracking about going straight up like that, because it is such a unique feeling going up that chain. There's not another experience like it in the park, and so even if you love coasters, there's still still a little nervous going straight up like that, but it's a lot of fun. I believe it's got 4 or 5 inversions, nice layout, and yeah, it's a really enjoyable ride. So now, going to the top 2, which I believe these are everybody's top 2 that's been to the park, and I'm actually going with Twisted Cyclone as my number 2 coaster in the park. You know, when this got the RMC treatment, I think some people are wondering how good would it be, should it be longer, that kind of thing, but they did a fantastic job with it. That first drop, if you're sitting in the back row, I mean, you are whipped over that hill, and then you are really quickly banked into that turn going down the hill, and that reverse cobra roll is awesome. But maybe the best airtime I've ever had on a coaster, and I would love to hear y'all's opinion on this, was that 90-degree overbanked hill. And that's the one area on the ride where I feel like you truly get floater airtime. Everything else is ejector airtime, and there's a lot of great ejector airtime moments. It goes upside down 3 times, so twice with the reverse cobra roll, and then it's got like a heartline roll or a 0G roll near the end. And the layout isn't the longest, it's a pretty quick ride, but to me it doesn't matter to me how long the ride is. What matters is the experience while you're on the ride, because I think sometimes people make such a big issue of a ride being short, but to me it's like, okay, how intense is it during that ride? Like for example, at Silver Dollar City, Outlaw Run is extremely short, but it packs a punch, and it is impressive. It is nonstop, so it doesn't matter to me that it's short. Same concept here with Twisted Cyclone. Just because the ride is shorter and is not as long as maybe some other RMCs, that does not mean that it's a negative for me, as long as it's intense and fun, and that's what this one is. So Twisted Cyclone is number 2. Now my number 1 is Goliath. It's a B&M Hyper. It's barely a B&M Hyper. I think the hill is right at 200 feet. Made in 2006, and originally I did have Twisted Cyclone as number 1, but as I rode Goliath a couple more times, the airtime in this is just incredible. As you go down the first drop, there is a rattle at the bottom of the first couple hills, and so if that bothers you, that might kind of turn you off on this ride a little bit, but it's not bad. I think some people make it out to be a bigger deal than it is, but it's not anything that's uncomfortable or unbearable. But yeah, the first drop is good. First couple drops are nothing special, but then you get into that moment where you have that downward tight helix, which is intense, I don't think there's another moment on another hypercoaster like that. So it's really unique, really intense, a lot of fun, and then the back half of the ride is just constant is just filled with a mixture of floater airtime and ejector airtime. Especially if you're sitting in the back or near the back, you're constantly thrown out of your seat. And to me, I personally, I like inversions, like 0G rolls are great, and Cobra rolls, but to me, airtime's the best. And so if you have a ride that has great sustained airtime and a mixture of both floater and ejector, that to me is what makes a ride really great. And so Goliath fits that mold. And it's a pretty it's a long layout, and the layout's really cool too because it basically stretches throughout like half of the park. So when you're going up the lift hill, it's going over some paths, and then when you go down the hill, the first hill and up the second one, it basically takes you back to this front of the park and by where the car park is and the drive-in and stuff like that, so you can really get a great view of this ride as you're entering the park, and you get a great view of that helix. And so you can definitely hear a rattle too when you're watching it from outside, but the layout's just so great, and that to me takes the #1 ride at Six Flags over Georgia. So I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. What is your #1? How do your rankings differ from mine? Am I completely off base anywhere? Because I'm willingly admitting that I am not a coaster expert. I'm becoming more of a coaster enthusiast, and so I am not as knowledgeable as a lot of people on coasters. So is there anything I missed or didn't point out that is very important to know about these coasters? And another thing I do want to say is just the park's laid out pretty nice. I think it's a beautiful park, and they've got a really good mixture of coasters here. You've got your Eurofighter coaster, you've got a stand-up, you've got a hyper, you've got a you've got a inverted, you've got a flyer, you've got an RMC, you got your wooden coaster, you got your Vekoma looping coaster, and then you got the Schwarzkopf looping coaster. So there's a good variety. To me, what they're missing is they've got a lot of B&M coasters. As I'm counting, let's see, 1, 2, 3. So they got at least 4 B&M coasters in the park of their main ones. And so, seeing some more brands over time or some more companies might be good. But also they're missing a launch coaster. To me, that's the one thing this park is missing. They do have height, even though it's just at 200. Six Flags normally doesn't have a lot of coasters with a ton of height. If you take out the Titan, Goliath, and I think King Ka, I think those are the ones that have the highest height. Well, Raging Bull as well. But they're missing a launch coaster. So that's what I think Six Flags over Georgia needs to really round out their coaster lineup, is being very strong. And so what are your guys' opinion on this? And as always, make sure and hit that like button if you enjoyed the video, and if you want to subscribe so you can stay up to date with more content that we release with M&J Games, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And we always appreciate the support, and have a great rest of your day.